In this episode, I'll be reviewing the book, Paul Newman, The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, a Memoir. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, theater, among other areas of the arts. Today I'm reviewing this incredible book by Paul Newman, which is so personal, so vulnerable, so incredibly truthful, and the man truly went inside of himself and left nothing but his soul really in this book. It's really extraordinary, and I've read my share of memoirs and autobiographies and biographies, but this is so personal, and he really had the ability to, like any great actor, because actors have to use themselves to look within themselves and to evolve and use their emotional life to play all kinds of different roles. And I think that's why he was such a great actor. But the backstory for this is also quite fascinating, because from '86 until 1991, he was interviewed by Stewart Stern, who was a friend of his, a screenwriter. He actually wrote Rebel Without a Cause. And they sat together and he interviewed Paul Newman from '86 until '91, which is, the result is this. And they wrote so much after 5 years that they didn't really know what to do with it all. And for whatever reason, the project was abandoned. And he really wanted, he says it back, it just showed the back, great picture of Newman. And he says, there's a quote here, he says, "This book came out of the struggle to try and explain it all to my kids. I want to leave some kind of record that sets things straight, pokes holes in the mythology that's sprung up around me, destroys some of the legends and keeps the piranhas off. Something that documents the time I was on this planet with some kind of accuracy, because what exists on the record now has no bearing at all on the truth. That's all I really want to do." Paul Newman. So, you know, he was someone constantly in the tabloids for many years. I've actually read a couple of really good books on him. One by his friend A.E. Hotchner, which I really enjoyed, and another biography. And so I've known a lot about him, but I mean, he mentions mainly the tabloids. He felt a lot of what was in the tabloids was not really an accurate portrayal of who he was. And so he also really wanted to do this for his children. So his children really got a much better sense of who he was. And so, like I said, the backstory for this is fascinating, because the project was abandoned, and for years his family didn't even know where all of the interviews went. And also, what Paul wanted to do, and Stewart Stern, was they wanted to talk to a lot of people that knew Paul, and he wanted complete honesty about how they felt about him. So it's him reacting off of what also people are also saying in the interviews, which is quite fascinating. So, you know, you got George Roy Hill, who directed Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting. They talked to him. They talked to Tom Cruise, who was in The Color of Money with him. His wife, of course, Joanne Woodward. Many people. Sidney Lumet, who directed The Verdict. Many people. And it's interesting because they wanted such complete honesty, and no one really said anything that was negative towards him. One of the things that George Roy Hill said was that because he was he was known to be a practical joker, and he played all sorts of elaborate pranks on people. And he played a prank on George Roy Hill, and George Roy Hill thought it was just such a mean and stupid prank. And he felt that his pranks were rooted in resentment of some kinds, that's why he did these pranks on people. And so he talks about a prank that he pulled on George Roy Hill, a joke that scared the death out of George Roy Hill on the film Slapshot. And so, but other than that, there wasn't really a lot of negative things people said. One thing that I thought was interesting, that a very good friend of his who passed away in because as very well known, he was became a race car driver as well, Paul. And so one of his very close friends, who they interview in the book, who passed away I guess not long after they interviewed him, sometime in the late 80s, in a car crash while he was driving. He said that PAUL actually told him that he didn't think people liked him very much. And he thought, he was shocked, this movie star that people revere thinks that people don't like him very much. And that was so interesting I found about PAUL, was that he seemed to put himself down a lot. He seemed to put his success down a lot. Even his philanthropy work and all the charity work he did, he questioned his motives. And he says, he has this great self-awareness. He was in therapy and stuff, and so again, the ability to look inward was strong. And that's, of course, as an actor, that's part of the job, is to look inward and use yourself to play all kinds of different roles. And he was aware that he had a tendency to put himself down. And, one thing certainly about his flaws that came up was his drinking. He did struggle with alcohol. He said on the one hand, it sort of gave him a lot of focus, but obviously, like even Joanne Woodward talked about, like, it really sometimes tested the marriage and led to problems. But they had a very, very strong love, and he talks about her with great admiration and love and respect. And their 50-year marriage is remarkable. But, for anyone who knows a lot about him, obviously a lot of the things that we know, like for example, the fact that he was married to another woman before he was married to Joanne Woodward. He already had 3 kids with another woman. And then he had another 3 kids with Joanne Woodward. Of course, his charity work, his race car driving, the fact that he became a movie star, that he directed theater, that he was also in theater as an actor on Broadway. Like, he did so much stuff. So, I think a lot of people, if you know about PAUL, you know those facts. But I would imagine, even the biographers, I'm no expert on how to write a biography, but, on the one hand, autobiographies or memoirs, sometimes you're only getting the subjects, since, like, the subject matter, the subject is writing the subject matter on themselves. Sometimes you might get a certain only their point of view about certain things, which is the upside of biography, because it's much more objective, because they can do so much research and talk to so many people and read interviews with the subject and so on and so forth. However, on the other hand, something like this, that I think, unless someone like PAUL worked with a biographer, which I guess in a way Stewart Stern was, is a little different, because he's going so inward and talking so much about his feelings that I don't think he would have told a journalist on a film set or for a magazine or a newspaper. It's really personal stuff. And obviously he went into this project with Stewart Stern knowing that that's what they wanted to do. So that's why it's so unique, because you get not just anecdotes, but feelings and talking about his shortcomings and flaws, and really deeply and profound. And he was really intelligent, I found, and the way intuitive, and the way and the way in which he could express himself was so articulate. And I really admire him for that, because that's not easy for anyone. Another thing is his son dying. Obviously, that was how can you describe it? That's terrible for anyone to lose their child, beyond terrible. And so we know those things, but he really, talks about his feelings about that. And he felt they had a rocky relationship and things like that. Another thing that was really interesting is he had 6 children, and he didn't have a very good, I didn't know this, he didn't have a very good relationship with his mother, for example. They didn't talk for like 15 years. At one point, he really resented her for a lot of different reasons. His father died when he was young, which I did know, when he was in his 20s, but they were never very, very close either. And he said his parents didn't have a natural instinct for parenting, and he felt that he didn't have one either, which is again, that's his thing. He puts himself down. Maybe that's true I don't know. You'd have to talk to his kids, and his kids are the ones who found this, looked for the manuscript, didn't know where the manuscript was, and then it turned up about 4 years ago in a basement in one of their homes in Connecticut. They found it, and so they're the ones that put this together. And when they talk about him with such love, I found, and admiration and respect. And I mean, everybody has problems with their parents and vice versa. That's natural, but it's interesting that he, again, he has this way of putting himself down, and one of the people that they interview in the book, he says once when Paul got drunk, he was really angry and he was putting down everything about himself, all the movies he did, his shortcomings as a father, his shortcomings as a husband, everything he did, he would just tear into it. So part of him felt that all the success he had, he didn't deserve it. He felt some of it had to do with his looks. And, I mean, I know people have said that, but to me, he's such a great talent. Some people have felt that, like Lee Strasberg and, George C. Scott would say, well, he wasn't that good of an actor. And Lee Strasberg, the great acting teacher, said he relied too much on his looks, that he could have been great. And I've never found that. Sure, he's in his share of duds like anybody else, but he got better and better and better as an actor, and he worked really, really hard. It did not come naturally to him, acting, and so he worked really hard on it. And if you watch his early career, from, like one of his first movies, Somebody Up There Likes Me, which I really, really like, all the way up to, The Verdict, The Color of Money, towards the end of his career, as we go forward, Nobody's Fool, Road to Perdition, he got better, and he was always good, but he got better and better and better, and everything he did, it became so effortless. I mean, I know Tom Cruise said that about him. When he was acting with him in The Color of Money, it was like watching somebody not even give a performance. It's like just being with a living, breathing human being. And so he was incredible, but he had this tendency to put himself down. And so, he had his share of demons, certainly, but to me, he's a remarkable person and so generous, and he helped a lot of people. A lot of his friends, if they were struggling or in trouble, and things like that. And so like I said, he doesn't really give himself enough credit, I found. But another chapter which is interesting is that people do know his role in politics and the civil rights movement, and he does talk a lot about that, and share certain anecdotes and stories that you're not going to find anywhere. So what a wonderful book. I'd have to thank his children for putting this together and releasing it to the world, because he's such an inspiration, not just for people who want to be actors because of his discipline and his work ethic, but just like how to live a good life. How to be generous, how to look inward, how to try to evolve, how to always try to better yourself. Just a lot of things qualities he did, and things he tried to attempt in himself to become a better person and a more generous person, and a better father and a better husband and a better actor. Everything. He was always striving and to improve himself, which is never really easy, right? And so I love it. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend getting it. Actually, this was a gift from one of my Patreon members, George W. Starts. George, I want to thank you so much for buying this book and sending it to me. I really, really loved it. So for those of you who have read it, comment below. Let me know what you think. Or if you watch this video and go away and read it, come back and let's chat. Let me know what you think of the book. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out, so head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click the thanks link, and from there you can leave a donation if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By clicking the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. Also, click the like button below and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this book. Thank you again, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.